Good evening. Welcome to the City of Sugar Land City Council meeting for March the 22nd. A little bit about tonight's meeting. I'm going to ask that when we have speakers, that we don't have clapping, jeering, anything of that nature. Let's keep it professional for everybody. In a minute, we're going to open up on the public comment. Thomas is going to read into the record email comments that we've received. And then I've got a number of folks that have signed up to speak, and we'll go through those. City Council won't have any exchange with the audience. City Council will direct their questions to the staff and or the developer. So everybody clear? Let's open it up. Item number 2, public comment. Thomas, I'm going to let you start with reading into the record the comments that we've received by email.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First up is George Horn, 1303 Creekford Circle, Sugar Land, Texas, 77478. I am a 35-year resident of Sugar Creek. I never thought a project like this would ever be considered or that it would be in a position to strongly oppose such a development. Zoning is in place for many good reasons. Please say no to this project and protect the present and future of Sugar Creek as we have come to know and love. I am certain there are many other desirable locations in the area for your project. Please don't build at this location, as it will have a very big negative impact to incomparable Sugar Creek. Next up is Julie Steadley, 1802 Sugar Crossing Drive, Sugar Land, Texas. My husband first moved to Sugar Creek with his parents in 1981. We moved our family to First Colony in 2013, but recently purchased a home in Sugar Creek. The Sugar Creek home plus renovations is a 7-figure investment for our family. Professionally, my husband has a 30-year career in commercial real estate, which includes developing, acquiring, financing, and constructing over $1.5 billion of real estate. Notable Sugar Land, he developed $112 million St. Luke's Sugar Land Hospital. Regarding this project, I am opposed to the change in zoning to allow apartment development on this tract. Why not apartment development? There are already plenty of apartments in Sugar Land. According to CoStar, there are currently 16,207 units in Sugar Land, Missouri City submarket. An additional 800 units are currently under construction. According to Apartment Data Services, there are 2,964 units proposed in this submarket, including this project. Current vacancy is 6%, and historical stabilized occupancy is 93.3%. Since 2013, 6,220 units have been added to the submarket. Units under construction plus projects would add 3,764 units to absorb. So how do we compute demand for new units? According to 2012, demand bottled by 3 PhDs from University of Houston, 8.7 new jobs are required to fill 1 new apartment unit. The PhDs noted in their model, it is especially useful when appraisers, land planners, consultants, and others are attempting to estimate how long it will take for single new apartment complex to reach stabilized occupancy. If we apply this new job metric to the proposed project, 3,279 new jobs are required to fill the project to stabilize occupancy. Additionally, 30,869 jobs are required to fill the 3,764 new construction proposed units to stabilize occupancy. So what about employment? According to Sugar Land EDC, 2019 employment increased 3.1%, or approximately 2,316 new jobs. Based on 2,316 new jobs per year, 3,869 jobs required to fill the 3,764 new and proposed units to stabilize occupancy. It will take 13 years and 4 months to fill these projects. Clearly, adding an additional 3,764 units to the submarket will result in an acute supply-demand imbalance, consequently changing the zoning to accommodate this 402-unit project in a forced location is not necessary. In closing, if you ever heard the phrase, "Don't California my Texas," I'm asking you not to Houston my Sugarland. Thank you for your time and consideration. And for the record, Mr. Mayor, Stephen Steadley submitted a list of comments. Just wanted to let him, Stephen Steadley, 1802 Sugarland Crossing, Sugarland, Texas. We did submit those to staff for review.
Okay.
Colby Curtis. Let's see here. Colby Curtis, 3914 Wood Hollow Court, Sugarland, Texas, 79479. I appreciate the opportunity to present my comments tonight. To begin, I would like to apologize as I had a conflict tonight and could not be here to speak to you in person. I am in favor of the rezoning of the 8 acres of Sugar Creek Boulevard from its current VO office zoning to plan development zoning. I've been a Sugarland resident for 33 years and have been involved in commercial real estate in Sugarland for almost my entire career. That has included a number of projects in Sugar Creek Center. 30 years ago, I leased my first Sugarland office in 1 Sugar Creek Center, or Comerica Bank building. That initial office space was next door to Jake Kamen and Don Russell, the developers of Sugar Creek. That coincidentally, yet fortuitous choice of office space led to a long-term relationship with Don. I've been fortunate to have been able to seek his guidance and assistance through years of numerous projects, and that I have been involved with them. On many occasions, he expressed his frustration to me not being able to convince the city to consider viable development alternatives, which might be outside of the city's office-only zoning that was in place for Sugar Creek Center. That frustration stemmed from the fact that over 25 years, there was never enough demand for office space only to successfully fill the development. Demand cannot be legislated. Demand is an economic principle relating to the quantity of a product that a consumer is willing to purchase at a given price over a given time period. Today's commercial real estate consumers desire environments where they can live, work, and play in one location. This does not mean that we need to sacrifice quality. That can be legislated. If Sugarland is to continue to lead our region as a dynamic community, that is the first choice for individuals, families, and businesses considering relocation, then we must not only compete, we must excel at offering products and environments that are first in class and that offer consumers what they are demanding. As you know, the current City of Sugarland land use plan was the result of over 5 years of work by more than 300 individuals. The plan was thoroughly vetted before being adopted by the city. I feel that one of the more important guidance recommendations in the plan was the recommendation to establish 5 regional activity centers, which will allow for a variety of uses. The consideration of the Sugar Creek mixed-use project will be a litmus test for both the viability of the land use plan and the future of the regional activity centers recommended in the plan. Please do not nullify the hard work and consideration that went into that plan. The 8 acres in Sugar Creek is an ideal location for a regional activity center. It is at the entrance to the city. It is surrounded by other commercial development, and it possesses excellent ingress and egress opportunities with Highway 90, Dairy Ashford, and Highway 59, all being only a block away. I cannot speak to the massing, the design, or the configuration of the proposed Kaplan project. I do feel that Kaplan is a proven first-class developer and that all of those issues will be successfully vetted by their team, by the city, and by all of you. I would, however, like to voice my strong support for the mixed-use nature of the project and the proposed change from the current VO zoning to planned development zoning. I am certain that a quality mixed-use development will bring value to the city, to Sugar Creek, and the surrounding property owners. Next is Gary Evans, 2702 Country Club Boulevard, Sugarland, Texas. As a 40-year resident of Sugar Creek, I encourage the leadership to focus their priorities as we begin a 51st year. Our record-setting property values come despite 700 apartments virtually next door to us on Dulles. The residents of Sugar Creek, like my family, have a limited choice of quality restaurants and retail shopping. We don't have a neighborhood grocery, and yet our leadership diverts our attention from these realities by fighting against apartments. This time, the proposed apartments are well removed from our neighborhood. The new apartments proposed district at Sugar Creek will offer 600 new and upscale tenants to the Sugar Creek Triangle across 59. Let's support that effort and figure out how to leverage the newcomers to help bring us improved services like a nice restaurant, quality retail, and please, a grocery store. I endorse this project and look forward to better access to restaurants and shopping. And then last for me is Clay Camp. Let's see here. Do not have an address for the record. My parents moved to Sugar Creek in 1972. I'm very proud to say that I have a deep passion and love for Sugar Creek, having been born and raised on Fairway Drive. My parents both agree that the best decision they ever made was moving to the subdivision where the freeway ended back then and raising their 4 children in Sugarland. My dad had several opportunities to move into town or to another city with work, but Sugar Creek was home. The draw of Sugar Creek and Sugarland was simple. A quiet little town with a thriving neighborhood where kids could be kids and not worry about any interruptions. Coming full circle, my wife and I have moved back into the subdivision 8 years ago and are proudly raising our 5-year-old son in the same environment as I did, and for the same reasons my parents did for us back in the 70s and 80s. I have firsthand seen the subdivision transition from an older generation to a thriving, younger population with young children all throughout the neighborhood. SCCC on a Friday night, family fun night, would give you a glimpse of where our subdivision and country club is and going for many years to come. However, if an apartment complex of any type were to be built across the freeway, this would severely tarnish our immaculate neighborhood with unwanted traffic and visitors and potential crime. And new retail is not the answer either. Our market is saturated with lots of vacancies, with a long list of failed businesses or relocations over the years. We as a community do not want or need any level of apartments in the 478. I want my son and all of his friends to have the same experience as I did growing up in the neighborhood. He can be down the street or at a friend's house on the other side of the creek, and I won't have the opportunity, and I won't have to worry about him making his way home. City Council, please don't pass a harm to our community that was founded on integrity and has been upheld for 50 years. With a project that makes no sense for the community, that is Sugarland and the great neighborhood of Sugar Creek. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Thomas. Before we get started, I'm going to make one request of all the speakers that come forward. If you have a financial interest in this project, I'd ask that you disclose it when you come to the mic. We need to understand the facts surrounding the support or not. So with that request, we'll have 3 minutes for each speaker. If a group of speakers get together and they want to consolidate, then we'll allow more than 3 minutes. So 3 minutes, there's no limitation on the number of speakers. We'll be here until everybody's had had a chance to have their say. Our seventh speaker is somebody that council knows very well. She was the chair of our land use plan, Miss Debbie Kaufman. Debbie, could you come forward, please? And thank you for your service.
Kaufman, this June will mark the 28th year that we've been a resident of Sugar Land at 3206 Explorer Cove. Tonight's workshop focuses on the land use plan guidelines for regional activity centers, neighborhood activity centers, and specifically an 8-acre parcel of land in the Sugar Creek Triangle, an area that has been identified in the plan as one of the 5 regional activity centers. As the former co-chair of LUAC, I'm more than pleased to see a developer engage and embrace the plan that the citizens, P&Z Commission, and the City Council approved nearly 4 years ago. This textbook is thorough, and it outlines a comprehensive plan for the whole of the city as well as for each regional and neighborhood activity center. May I remind everyone that each activity center should have its own unique identity and not be a cookie-cutter copy of another, but rather be designed and redeveloped to serve the needs of the specific area of the city. I love the improvements that are going on right now here in Town Center. They're using the guidelines from the land use plan, and we already see a knock-on effect as neighbors of businesses are improving their own as in response to other improvements. As Sugar Land has less than 7% of its land mass available for new development, redevelopment was the vision for the land use plan. It's really key. It's been intimated by some residents and business professionals near the Sugar Creek Triangle that comprehensive planning and more studies are required by the city before passing what, in many people's opinion, is a prime quality development for the Sugar Creek Triangle and what is offering the one element that is missing in that area, residences. So I'd like to know why 5 years of research, surveys, debates, presentations for comment do not qualify as a comprehensive approach. It has also been suggested that residents are not informed. We're not informed of the land use plan before its adoption. But let me show you a mailing and a flyer that I still have. This was the 4th year of the plan. This was a flyer. I have to applaud the city for being very transparent, kept us all up to date with emails and website postings and mailers. You just covered all the bases. I'm just going to read what you have right here in this particular one. The city must be prepared to respond proactively to demographic trends and long-term market shifts. The land use plan is the single most important document for guiding this response. It will guide future development and redevelopment to align with the vision and goals of the comprehensive plan and ensure that Sugar Land continues to thrive in the future. We have a quality developer who has spent the past 2 years with city staff
About 30 seconds, Deb.
Okay, deciphering the intricacies of the plan, and in order to present to all of us and implement what the commission and the council approved in 2018. Please don't backtrack unnecessarily and further frustrate any would-be redevelopment of our aging infrastructure. If all the time and expense to update the land use plan is ignored the first time we see a major opportunity to implement the vision, what hope is there for any future developer taking Sugar Land seriously? We don't even support our own vision. Okay, again, studies have been done, boxes have been ticked. As a citizen, I ask you to please move forward with the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Our 8th speaker tonight is Tom Pappas, Pappas Restaurants. Tom?
Hello. Thank you for letting me speak today, council members.
Tom, if you could give us your address and
my address would be the Pappasitos location of our local business. I am a non-voting shareholder and a family member of Pappas Restaurants, so I would have a financial interest in the development of real estate, whether it be what it currently stands. But I do see, on behalf of Harris Pappas and myself, Pappas Restaurants do believe the development proposed for the Sugar Land Creek would benefit the immediate community and our local business, Pappasitos. The proposed development is catering to 2 fast-growing market segments, the young professionals and individuals downsizing and homeownership. The strategic location of this development offers a highly successful college graduates that may be in the area looking to still commute in those buildings downtown, which are difficult to even staff with full-time team members or working remotely. And Sugar Land area development would benefit the residential side with these individuals that have a more disposable discrepancy in their income to spend weekly and daily at local retail venues. We believe the development is a value to the city of Sugar Land and local businesses, and thank you on behalf of Pappas Restaurants for speaking today.
Thank you. Our next guest is Stuart Morris. Stuart?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Honorable City Council, for letting me speak for a moment. My name is Stuart Morris, Jr. I live at number 8 West Rivercrest Drive on the west side of Houston, president of Stewart Security Capital. Born and raised in Houston, educated in public schools, graduate at Rice University, MBA, UT, Austin. Started working at Stewart Title at age 10. After I graduated, I worked with Stewart Title for 48 years. I brought with me tonight my 102-year-old father, good friends and business partner with Jake Kamen on the development of Sugar Creek. He also was founder of Southern National Bank that was bought out by Prosperity. My sister was chairman of the board. Harvey Zinn, who's probably going to be speaking, was president of Southern National. They designed the campus using Jeffersonian architecture for Monticello, Poplar Forest, and the East Lawn of the University of Virginia, which is now a home base for Prosperity Bank. My uncle Carlos Morris was one of the original investors in a bunch of real estate in the business community over there in the Triangle as well. Finally, my father is founder of Houston Baptist University, started in 1960. And interesting, today we're now building a building that is a faithful duplicate of Independence Hall, Philadelphia. Will house the Center for Law and Liberty on the campus, which teaches American founding father principles and the principles of free enterprise, closely related to this community. I'm in support of the Sugar Creek Triangle development for the following 4 reasons. I've known Mike Kaplan for maybe 40 years. He has successfully invested, we have successfully invested, in answer to your question, Mr. Mayor, I am an investor and have for many years, along with Jeff Simpson, his partner and the CFO. They're quality people. They've done very quality developments in Texas, Arizona, California, and maybe a few other places, but they're based here in Houston.
About 30 seconds left, sir.
Mr. Kaplan is a man of his word, vastly experienced this kind of development. The proposed walkable mixed-use development will be a centerpiece for Sugar Creek Triangle, and the core 8 acres will include mid-rise, 5-story building with parking garage, upscale pantry that was mentioned earlier on the ground floor, walkable street, with 3 restaurants Mr. Pappas was talking about. A smaller scale of a Sugar Land walkable mixed-use town center where we are right now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next guest will be Brian Monk. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council, for giving me the time to speak to this evening. I'd like to predicate my speech this evening that I am pro-development, I'm pro-commerce. I believe that projects like this have their place, just not here. Previous meetings, I've stated some things that I felt like were pretty important. I won't go over those this evening, but I think one of the biggest concerns that I have being a 2-year resident of Sugar Creek is the reason I moved out here was I was a resident of Bel Air and Harris County. And I actually fled, for lack of a better term, that area because of developments like this, because it presented all kinds of traffic congestion problems, amongst other things. But that would be the main thing, and bringing people in that were transient, who really didn't care about the neighborhood per se that they were living in. They were just there for a temporary timeframe. I think there is a commerce issue as it is in this city. If I drive around and look at any, major intersection, I can see a vast amount of empty retail space. That's including the entrance to Sugar Creek neighborhood. That includes up and down Williams Trace. I can drive up and down Highway 6 from 59 all the way down to 1092 and see empty, vacant retail spaces lining our streets. And, part of this project is to bring in additional commerce, but I don't think that's going to fix the other commerce issues that we have. And I don't think that bringing in 400 units is going to solve that problem either. I appreciate that there are some retail interests here this evening that look at this as a good opportunity to have more customers. Frankly, that's not my problem. They chose to develop here as retail customers. I think that's part of the problem is we have to be smart about what kind of commerce we bring in and who's actually going to support it. And not just tomorrow, but over the next 10, 15, 20 years so that we don't wind up with what we thought was a good idea in front of Sugar Creek 20 years ago where we had a slew of retail up there, including a grocery store that's now gone. So I don't think you remedy the problem by adding to the problem. And that's all I have to say about this. I don't support this plan at all. Thank you.
Our next guest is Mr. Harvey Zinn.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I am not an investor in this project, but my brother and his wife are, and my cousins, and I don't think I've been invited to Passover dinner this week. So I apologize for opposing this opposition of this apartment project. I have a disclaimer to make. First of all, when I got involved in September of 2021, I did not know the rules of planning and zoning. I knew that independence was the key word. So I want to reconfirm to you, the council members and the mayor, I have been independent to every planning and zoning commissioner. I never spoke to them till after the vote. And I went up there and said, thank you for your service. And I have not talked to one council person in support of this position or against it till after the election. Now, what I want to go over are some of the comments made at the commissioners' hearings. In the January 11th and February 24th meetings, there were statements made that the apartments in Stafford never created a loss of value to the Sugar Creek homes. And they're correct. But that's not the reason. The reason is we did redevelop Sugar Creek. We, the members of Sugar Creek Country Club and the homeowners, have invested well over $8 million in the country club, in the building, the facility, the tennis, the fitness, and that has created the value. The concerns for the club members is what happens when these apartments turn bad. Just like Brayburn Country Club, in that area where they're all fenced around because of the apartments. That concerns us, but we're continuing to put $1 to $3 million a year into the club to keep the values increasing in Sugar Creek. Now, the February 24th commissioners hearing, one of the commissioners asked a Kaplan representative, have you ever built a live, work-in apartment? The answer was no. Now, in the land plan use plan of 2018, they said no standalone apartments. If they have no use, they have no experience in a live, work apartments, they're building a standalone apartment. And that's what we're saying it's a standalone apartment. That's the issue we have. The land plan use of 2018, a good plan, but no more standalone apartments. In the February 24th meeting, again, a commissioner asked the question, when would the restaurants be built?
About 20 seconds, Harvey.
Okay, the answer was simple. When we're 70% leased. Go back to September of 2021 when we had the Sugar Creek Home Association meeting. The question was asked, what is the long-term investment of this? We've already got a buyer, and we'll be out of it in 3 years. The Kaplan Group will never build that restaurant. It's a standalone apartment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Zinn. Our next guest is Peter Jacob. Peter?
Good evening, good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Peter Jacob. I live in Sugar Creek at 3019 Montford Court since 1995. I'm here tonight to voice my support of the zoning change of PO to PD for the mixed-use development, the district at Sugar Creek and Sugar Creek Center. Sugar Creek residents have voiced their opposition to this development for reasons such as reduction in property values, increased crime, and increased traffic through Sugar Creek. But at the end of the day, the facts speak for themselves. I'm going to support my position with facts, not hyperbole. The impact to property values. Living close to Sugar Creek entrance at Broadmoor, one cannot miss the number of apartments located across from Sugar Creek. There's a total of 688 units between 3 existing complexes, the Trestles, which is across from Riverbend Country Club, Shadowbrook, which is across from the entrance to Sugar Creek, and the Vinings across from Dulles Elementary School. These multifamily complexes were built between 1996 and 2000, over 2 decades ago. Upon review of historical data, the median property values at Sugar Creek during the same period increased from $58.76 per square foot in 1997 to $142.56 per square foot in 2021. This is an increase of 142% in lieu of the multifamily located directly across from Sugar Creek. I think anyone would be hard-pressed to present evidence of decreased property values due to the impact of being in close proximity to these multifamily developments. In 2021, Sugar Land was rated #2 safest mid-sized city in America. I want to keep the citizens of Sugar Land safe. But to me, how is criminal activity in an apartment any different than criminal activity in a rental home located at the end of my cul-de-sac? Several years ago, Sugar Land Police Department was called into this home for spousal abuse. It was a continuing issue. Do we look the other way because it occurred in Sugar Creek in a rental home? Criminal activity can occur at any time in any neighborhood. As far as traffic, I can attest to the fact when school is in session, there is more traffic on Longview as a result of parents driving their children to and from Fort Bend Christian Academy in the morning and afternoons to avoid the dullest school zones than there will be generated from district at Sugar Creek with access to both US 59 and US 90.
About 24 seconds.
Okay. The development is to be located on the opposite side of US 59 and Sugar Creek main entrance. I find it hard to believe residents of this Kaplan development will find it more favorable to use Country Club to access Dulles than use 90. Do people truly think someone is going to drive along Country Club to shop at Home Depot? In closing, one of the city of Sugar Land's credos is work, live, and play. The district at Sugar Creek exemplifies this, providing each of these aspects within its development. I appreciate your time and thank you for allowing me to voice my opinion.
Thank you, Peter. Our next guest is David Steadley. David, if you tell us your address too.
Yes, sir. My address is, well, actually I have 2, 1802 Sugar Crossing Drive and 210 Laurel Springs. The Laurel Springs is in Sugar Creek. I provided a handout because I cannot do a PowerPoint presentation, but basically my presentation is district at Sugar Creek, not in my backyard. I have a couple of quotes from the Sugar Land Economic Development website. They talk about small town lifestyle, big city amenities, the sweet life, beautiful master plan communities. There's not one mention of apartments. In fact, if you search for apartments on that website, the result you will get is, sorry, we cannot find any results. In the land use plan, we have several quotes about how the LUP aims to improve residents' quality of life, preserve our neighborhoods, and protect our neighborhoods. Is it not germane that this project prove that it will improve the quality of life for the residents of Sugar Land, and protect the integrity of our neighborhoods. The LUP also talks about phasing protections that should be put in place when there's mixed-use multifamily. At present, District B is not required to be built. Additionally, District B is the crutch used by Kaplan to support their claim of it not being standalone apartments. Half a boat doesn't float, does it? I also have two quotes in my presentation that are specific to the the Sugar Creek Triangle Rack. We have been told that the project complies with the LUP, but this project is not a high-rise project, which is specifically mentioned on page 84, and public input and apprehension has been surprisingly ignored, and public input is required for redevelopment of that area. Page 85. Also in the LUP, there was a question asked: should new multifamily be allowed in the city? The answer is on page 33 of that document. The community has become very concerned with the impacts of additional multifamily residential on home values, schools, mobility, and potential increase in crime. Of the 188 responses received from the online town hall, 81% stated opposition to multifamily high-density apartments. There's a clear concern about impacts of future multifamily residential development in the city. The LUP, page 32, also talks about how apartments should only be allowed in walkable areas. The Sugar Creek Triangle is not a walkable area, despite efforts to make this project appear so. It is not town center, it is not Manhattan, it is not downtown Houston, which, by the way, has an underground tunnel system for a reason. Our weather is
about 22
terrible.
seconds.
Okay. Standalone apartments not allowed. 387 units, 15 live-work units, 2,376 square feet of non-residential space, and 3 maybe future restaurants can't be approved. This project doesn't change the fact that only 5,500 people live and work in Sugar Land, and it doesn't produce any prime jobs. I'm sure I'm at my time
You're
limit,
at your
so
time, David.
I will just thank you for your consideration, and
Yes, sir.
I obviously do not support the project.
Yes, sir. Our next guest is Doug Goff. Doug? We won't start till you get to the podium.
I got a bum knee. Mayor, council, and staff, I appreciate this opportunity. Doug Goff, I'm co-president of Johnson Development Incorporation. As a matter of background, Johnson has about 20 large-scale master plan communities under active development on about 47,000 acres here in Houston, Dallas-Fort Worth, Austin, and Atlanta. We have literally thousands of multifamily units in every one of our communities, including in Fort Bend, Sienna Plantation, Riverstone, Imperial, Harvest Green, Cross Creek Ranch, and Jordan Ranch. And within the last 5 years, many of our communities, including Sienna, Riverstone, and Cross Creek, have been the top 50 best-selling in the nation. So the point being is that our multifamily housing has not impacted our values. Our experience has shown home values in Johnson communities and all the surrounding neighborhoods and other communities near us have not been affected whatsoever by that type of housing. Our minimal vacancies, our occupancy rates are 95 to 97%. Crime rates are not affected whatsoever. We're very low in all of our communities, which I've heard some criticism of and comments about. The majority of our housing units are rented by choice by millennials, young families, and empty nesters, which really typically profiles the fact that we have minimal impact on our school districts. In many cases, rents in Class A apartments, like an Imperial in Sienna and Riverstone, are equal to or greater than some of the monthly mortgage payments that our for sale housing has. Multifamily housing in First Colony is a good example of this. Most are 25 to 30 years old. They're very well maintained. Their rents remain high at market levels, and there's no direct crime associated with any of them. The proposal by Kaplan will be similar to what we've developed in Johnson communities, in that it will be a Class A facility that will command the highest rents in the marketplace and attract people who fit into the profile of Sugar Creek residents. In summary, we recommend that you consider approval of this proposal.
Thank you, Doug. Our next guest is Jeff Tallis. Jeff?
Thank you to the mayor, council, and staff for the opportunity to talk. I will explain, I guess I have to answer, I do have a vested interest. I stand to inherit some property in Venetian Estates if my mother doesn't live too long. Don't tell her I said that, please. No, the reason, my two addresses, 3618 Stratford Arms Lane and more appropriately 14015 Southwest Freeway Building 5, right down from the vacant Chase Bank. The reason I bring up that vacancy is I believe that through the development, and I encourage the passing of this rezoning, that businesses like mine will stay in the area because there'll be more businesses in the area and there'll be more people that I can do business with. My building, I think, would be considered maybe a Class B facility. Having higher end that maybe I can't afford keeps me in close proximity to this area. If it stands vacant, you're going to continue, in my opinion, to see people move out because I got to drive further to go find somewhere to eat. I don't have people to do business with right in the area. And when my family moved here in 1975, almost 50 years ago, I remember the excitement around the area. And I think, as I've seen the project, when I saw some of the prior presentations, I'm excited about it. It's exciting. I could see people moving back here to live in this type project because it's upscale. And I think the reality is people don't realize how much these apartments cost. And I think it will be an overall improvement to the area. It'll improve the value of my inheritance in Venetian Estates. It'll make me want to stay in my office. So once again, in summary, I encourage you to support this.
Jeff, what business are you in?
I'm in the insurance business.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Our next guest is Kelly Stewart. Kelly?
Thank you all for your time and for allowing me to speak today. You probably already know I'm a realtor. I've been here for almost every single meeting and I've spoken in opposition to the project. I'd like to point out that personal resident sentiments should be equally as important as facts. I hope to bring both to the table today. I hold a BS from University of Texas as well as an MBA from U of H. So I moved back here to raise my family. I grew up in Sugar Creek and I have twin boys who are 6 years old. More on that shortly. I am so happy to see a kind of a new version of gentrification in the area as many more young families move back to the subdivision. I'm also a Sugar Creek focused realtor. I am partner with my mother and we've been market leaders in the subdivision for the last 20 and 40 years respectively. To give you an idea of the amount of business we do in Sugar Creek, of all the sales annually, we're involved in some capacity in approximately 30% of all annual sales there. We have an immediate pulse on the migration of households into and out of the subdivision. And to reiterate something that my peers have said, we're so lucky to have a very strong country club, HOA, garden club that have all made improvements to the subdivision, but the homeowners have brought hundreds of thousands of dollars to renovate their properties. I personally have clients who have bought 30 to 50-year-old homes recently who are putting in $130,000 renovations, $300,000 renovations, and this is on top of $700,000 and $800,000 homes that are existing. Recently in 2021, there is a lot on Country Club Boulevard that lot value sold for $832,000. As you drive through the subdivision, you'll see new dumpsters all over the place, and we want to continue to see this gentrification in the subdivision, but we have to keep the neighborhood safe and the streets clear. In the last 3 years, sales prices in Sugar Creek have grown 8.4% and 7.4% respectively from 2019 to 2021. The resurgence of affluent professionals in our subdivision is welcome, and they are directly behind this. Of the 1,700 homes in Sugar Creek, average values in 2021 were $447,000, and of the approximate 220 homes in Venetian Estates, average values in 2021 were $1.17 million. Together, these two subdivisions have a residential property value of over $1 billion and rising annually. That's double the collective value from a decade ago. Our neighbors and homeowners are actively investing in their properties. They want a safe place to raise their families. In the two cul-de-sacs on either side of my property, there are 14 kids that are similar to my boys' ages. They ride bikes, they run the streets all the time, every day. They know that at their young age, they have to stay in the immediate cul-de-sacs by our house or the green space behind it. As they get older, they're going to want to go further and further, and they're going to want their independence. We don't have sidewalks in Sugar Creek.
About 15 seconds.
All right, so sidewalks are a huge concern. 59 to Dulles is a direct cut through on Country Club. The street is already very, very busy with traffic. For those who speak in favor of the rezoning, I hope that you all will seriously scrutinize the motives of these people. I have a lot more to say, but I think that interest has been feigned in the interest of finances. And I want to also point out that historically, homeowners are 35% more likely to get involved in public issues and voting than renters are. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kelly. Steve Parrott. Steve?
Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you all for letting us be here tonight. My name is Steve Parrott. My wife Diane and I live at 1206 Wedgwood Drive in Sugar Creek. I've been a lawyer for 48 years, and I've learned over the years that business and personal opinions drive decisions. On a personal level, I've learned over the last 6 months or so that a lot of people really don't like the idea of this project on a personal level. And so they don't like it, and I'm one of them. I don't like the idea of having a standalone apartment complex where it is. It requires a rezoning. It's a commercial development. There's no question about that. You drive over and look at it. It's a commercial development. And the developers want to shoehorn an apartment complex into a commercial development. On a business level, that seems to be a classic case of trying to ram a square peg in a round hole. They're trying to shoehorn something into this area that really doesn't fit the area. It's not a residential area. It's never going to be a high-end unit. They're probably 500 feet from a railroad track. Now, Venetian Estates and Alcare Lakes, they've got a big high retaining wall to try to block that sound. There's not going to be that blocking sound right there. So you think people are going to pay $3,000 or $4,000 a month or $2,000 a month to live in an apartment complex that a train goes by 24/7? Anyway, without beating all that dead horse, I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad thing for Sugar Land. The developers have never done this before. They're trying to create a situation where they have a mixed use where they really don't have a plan for the mixed use. If there was if somebody wanted a grocery store, there was one across the street there for years. They tried to put in another one and it failed. They tried to put in a fishing store, it failed. It's not going to work over there. And last time we learned that the developers already have a plan to block out the windows on the commercial space so as to not to create an eyesore. They've already planned for that space to be vacant. I hope that y'all will give consideration to both the personal and the business issues of people in Sugar Land, particularly in people in Sugar Creek who really don't want this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steve. Our next guest is Delana Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. I have no commercial interest in the property. I'm a resident of Sugar Creek. My family moved there in 1972. My stepfather, Ed Cleric, recently deceased, was one of the major builders within the community. I moved back in 1998. Though the 2018 land use plan allows for limited redevelopment under strict guidelines, the Kaplan's Group's proposal fails to meet the City Council's guidelines for the area as outlined in the 2018 land use plan. Specifically, you are voting on Part A standalone apartment complex with 15 work-live units that they have no experience in developing. There has been no testing in this market for a home, work, live space. And we have an inordinate amount of open retail space already for the type of retail that the Kaplan Group has envisioned, such as CPAs, financial planners, insurance agents. I see it as a dead-end opportunity from a real retail. If Part A and Part B were fused together, inseparable, then they might have a true mixed-use potential. The project will not be a commercial civic hub. The project is primarily a multi-story 387 apartment building. This project cannot and will not attract people to workshop, eat, or attend events because it is not offering restaurant, shops, or venue facilities as it's outlined in Proposal A, or Part A. That's Part B. Let's vote on Part B first. Let's develop the area commercially with restaurants and shops, and then visit the apartment complex later on. I strongly urge the council to vote no on this project as it's currently proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Our next guest is Jeff Sebastian. Jeff?
Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you for allowing us to be here, allowing me to speak. I own Classic Chevrolet in Sugar Land. We have about 350 employees. We also have another Classic Chevrolet down the road off of Highway 6 with another 150 employees. But I have zero vested interest in the project other than, yes, it would be beneficial to have additional, people that are living close by to buy and service cars, but really that doesn't matter to me either. What does matter to me more than anything, and I have some of the same concerns that some of the other speakers have had today. I've just moved to the community about 5 years ago. I live in the area now and obviously own the dealership, but I find it concerning that in the area there's so much vacancy and so many dilapidated retail structures. I just don't understand. In such a fabulous community with such amazing people, and then Sugar Creek is an amazing neighborhood. And so the last thing I would want as a business owner and a member of the community is to see anything negatively impact Sugar Creek or the surrounding areas. However, I feel like if a luxury community apartment complex were to come in that attracts people that are high income earners, you're going to bring more energy to the area, you're going to bring more people, and that's going to help the businesses that are leaving, that are failing, thrive. And mine is doing okay, but to be honest with you, we have to bring a lot of customers from outside of Sugar Land to buy cars from us for us to be competitive, because we don't generate enough activity within inside the city. But I just feel like if this complex is what it's said to be, which everything I've read says that it's going to be high-end luxury, grade A living space. It's with top-tier rent rolls or whatever. It's going to drive more energy to the area and help the businesses thrive and help fill some of those vacancies that we have around. Because I don't think anybody likes to see businesses coming in and then leaving and coming back. That's not good. So whatever we can do, it sounds like some of the opponents of it have some of the same concerns with that. It's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? I feel like you have to bring the people in, you have to bring the revenue in, and then the businesses can survive. I moved from the Woodlands, and when I was living in the Woodlands in a neighborhood, raising my family, they started building some of these higher-end apartment
About 30
complexes.
seconds, Jeff.
Yeah, we had the exact same concerns. I was on the other side of it. But at the end of the day, the apartments came in, they were high-end, they were luxury. It didn't affect crime in a negative way. It didn't affect traffic like we were afraid it was going to do. But what it did do is it allowed these other businesses to come in, these high-end restaurants. We had grocery stores like on every corner. Everything worked synergistically, and it worked out. And I feel like I get the concerns that the members of the community have, but if
Need to wrap up, Jeff.
yeah, if these guys can deliver on the project that they're setting forth, I think that'll be a win-win for everybody. That's my support.
Thank you, Jeff. Our next guest is Henry Hagendorf.
Hello, my name's Henry Hagendorf. I'm the owner's representative for an office building located at 14090 Southwest Freeway within the Sugar Creek Center POA. So our company owns and operates apartment communities and office buildings. So we have some experience in this. So I do not oppose the development of a Class A luxury apartment within a property owners association if the development is carefully planned and thoughtfully fits into the community, which from what I hear it does, but that is not my job to look at as a, the city will decide that. So our experience with multifamily communities is that the residents that are there are oftentimes paying rents that are similar to single-family mortgages. So they don't pose a threat to the community. They're typically young professionals, or in some cases, as someone mentioned earlier, empty nesters that are downsizing out of homes into apartments. I'm a perfect example of that. I live in a high-rise apartment project with 300 units, similar size, and most of the people, or all the people there, are typically young professionals, or in many cases, empty nesters that are just sort of in between trying to decide what's next from a living facility. Also, there's usually a perception that apartment communities create traffic issues with ingress and egress. That is not what we find, that the residents typically come and go at such different hours that it's not like, you have 300 cars that are backed up trying to get in and out of a project. We recently opened a 13-story similar 250 unit apartment complex in the Museum District. It is in Houston, but it covers a city block within a very affluent neighborhood in the Museum District, which is in the Rice University Medical Center area. Of course, there was concerns of the residents that were there in the beginning, but as they became educated and could see what the design of the project was, these apartments are not cheap. They're not inexpensive. They cost $200,000 to $300,000 per unit to build.
About 20 seconds.
So, just in closing, we are in favor of the project as long as it fits into the community, is designed properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Our next guest is Nadim Zabel.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Nadim Zabani. I'm with Tima Development based in Houston. I reside in West University. I don't have any financial interest in the project, but the firm I work for and manage, Tima Development, is a part owner in Ovid Properties, 7.4 acres, which is in Sugar Creek Center, very close to the site in question. So Ovid Properties is a member of the Sugar Creek POA. We were very pleased, and Ovid Properties has owned the site since 2006. So we've been owners for about 16 years now.
Okay.
We were very pleased when the city of Sugar Land approved the land use plan update in 2018 and set the guidelines and the policy for the redevelopment and development of those 5 regional activity centers. As an aside note, also as you all know, the president of the Sugar Creek POA, or rather the president also of the Architectural Review Committee of Sugar Creek, has given approval of the Kaplan Group's project as far as Sugar Creek is concerned. Obviously, it has to be approved by City Council. We at Ovid Properties support Kaplan's proposed development because it covers, or they've made a significant effort to design a project that meets the guidelines set by the land use plan update. So some of those guidelines were to create a mixed-use project, which they're attempting to do with the mix of residential, including live-work units, as well as the restaurants. And it will encourage more activity in the neighborhood with folks who live in the area as well as folks who work in the area. So for those reasons, all of us at Ovid Properties support this and recommend approval of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadeem. Our next guest is Jack Martin. Jack?
Your Honorable Mayor, this afternoon, before I came to speak with you, I decided to drive around where the development's going to be and take a quick look. After an hour of driving around, I became very impressed with the sheer lack of, or rather too much openings of how many open business spaces there were. I started photographing them so I could set all them out. I ran out of paper. Otherwise, I would have littered the floor. I lost count. There are, within walking distance alone, there's 10, 15 open businesses. And if you stretch out a mile or two, it's in the hundreds. Now, when I moved to Sugar Land, my father actually was good friends with the developer of Sugar Creek, the 3 attorneys. So, and I know this was not what they planned. This is not what they wanted for this. Now, you've got 20,000 apartments either being built or already constructed. And of those units, when they're finished, there's going to be around 1,200 to 1,300 empty apartments in the immediate area. Why do we need another 400 apartments, even if they fill up a small portion of them? No way does this thing meet the RAC guidelines that everybody voted for to try to develop Sugar Land. This, I don't even have the slightest idea how this somehow meets this. The empty storefronts mean no restaurants. They're everywhere. There's no grocery stores. I'm extremely pleased that Papas and the owners of Japaneros are in support of building these, so we know that they're telling us so that the residents of Sugar Creek, Venetian Estates and all can remember this when this thing, if this thing in fact does get built. I doubt we're going to have many people from Sugar Creek frequenting their business. What you have, I asked the developers, I said, what experience do you have with this? And they said, well, none. This is new to us. And I said, well, who do you expect this? And I'm not joking. You can tell them, we're expecting influencers from TikTok and YouTube to be living in these places. I talked to my millennial nephews and nieces. They broke out in hysterical laughter that some millennial is going to live in a $2,000 apartment 500 feet from a railroad track that is going to be influencing anything. They thought it was hysterically funny that they would do this. I also asked the developer in which of their projects they ever built that building apartments that the crime didn't go up.
Yeah, Jack.
They
30
had no
seconds.
answer.
Yeah,
How much longer, Mayor?
30 seconds.
The voters didn't vote for this. We don't need Houstonizing here. Bear one thing in mind. How many of you here actually go to the sugar factory and go to restaurants there, art galleries, movie theaters? Could you have been lied to by the developer? It's still empty. Don't Houstonize Sugarland. We don't need this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. That's all the folks that I have signed up, but if there's anyone else that would like to speak, Rich, go ahead.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, if you did not fill out a comment card when you're done with your comments, if you could fill one out for the record, please. Thank you.
Y'all ran out of them at the front, Joe.
I think we have some extras down there for you. Thank you very much.
Well, he's doing that, Mr. Mayor. Just for the record, my name is Richard Muller. I own the office building and the vacant property immediately adjacent to the area to be this proposed for rezoning. So to the extent that's a financial interest, that's my financial interest. I was going to give a big speech about my comments, but I thought that I would just read from your land use plan. And what I've passed out are excerpts from your land use plan, and I've highlighted all the reasons or all the ways that this proposal does not meet or is not consistent with the land use plan. I'm going to start with a big one. The city should not approve new standalone single-family, multifamily residential complexes. And that's what this is. They've done a good job of, as we might say in Louisiana, putting some lipstick on the pig. But at the end of the day, that's what this is. The only thing you are guaranteed in this rezoning application are a bunch of apartments and 18 live-work units. And then the commercial that's associated with apartments, but not any new commercial. You're not guaranteed any restaurants. In fact, if you read the document, those 3 buildings could be a nail salon, a hairdressers, and a dry cleaners. That's what's allowed under the document before you for approval. I don't think that anybody would see this as a mixed-use development if you got a bunch of apartments, a couple live-work units, and a nail salon, hairdressers, and a barbershop. But that's what's allowed. And that's not even guaranteed. The land use plan says phasing protections should be included to ensure that the remainder of the project, when you're doing mixed use, is built at the same time or prior to multifamily. This does not do that. If you look specifically, and I'm on page 85, and I'm not going to go through all of it, you can look at it at your leisure. Comprehensive redevelopment in the Sugar Creek area might warrant a different mix of usage, which would require a detailed study and public input. There has been no detailed study or public input on the redevelopment of the Sugar Creek Center. With all due respect to the lady who was on the committee that put this together, the report specifically outlines 50 things, 50 steps that you will do to take the vision that is in the land use plan and turn it into reality, including a whole bunch of studies which have not been done. And if you look at these charts, which are on the back, you've got a whole bunch of things that were supposed to be done in the 1 to 2 year time frame from when this was adopted, none of which has been done. So my point to all of this is, look.
Go ahead and wrap up, Rich.
Yep. All I'm asking y'all to do, and I think all the folks that have spoken are asking you to do, is follow what you said in this plan. Just read what you said and follow what you said in this plan. And if you do that, we'll get to the right result. This does not do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good to be here. I'm in 20 years resident of Sugar Creek.
Yes, sir.
I moved here from Houston, and it was the best decision I have ever made. I heard here a couple of times, at least a couple of times, please do not make Houston out of Sugarland, and do not bring California to Texas. I applaud it. That's an amazing statement, and we should all take it to heart. I've been living here in this country for over 40 years, and the democracy, the values that we, the people, represent here is phenomenal. I would like to paraphrase and say, we, the voters who live in Sugar Creek and other areas, have the power to make changes, and changes will be made. I strongly oppose this development. I value the quality of life in Sugar Creek, and I want to keep it as is. Please do not bring Houston to Sugarland. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas.
I'm sorry, sir. What was your name for the record, sir?
My name is Jersey Tribeck. I live at 1430 Sugar Creek Boulevard.
Yeah, Thomas, if you get him to fill out a form. Yeah. Anyone else that would like to speak? Going once? Going twice? Okay, we'll move on. Item number 3, workshop 3A, review of and discussion on the land use plan, activity centers implementation project, and the district at Sugar Creek final development plan project proposal. We've got Lauren Fair, our principal planner, and Ruth Lomer, our city planner, long range. Lauren, welcome. Ruth, welcome.
Welcome. And we've got Devin Rodriguez, also.
And we got Devin.
Director. Yes.
Sorry, I see
Yes,
Devin
sir.
out there. I didn't know she was going to be speaking.
That's okay. It's okay. Group effort, team effort. So thank you. I'm going to just start with a quick slide of just our agenda and then hand it off to Ruth. She's going to give us kind of an overview, a recap of the land use plan, talk through regional activity centers, how we got to the land use plan, talk a little bit about what it means for redevelopment, for infill development, and the parameters around multifamily as it relates to how it was established and included in the land use plan. Then I'm going to come up and do an overview of the district at Sugar Creek proposal and how staff has evaluated that versus the land use plan. Then we're going to pass it off to Devin, who's going to talk a little bit about the economic development principles as it relates to redevelopment and growth and some of the work we're doing with the activity centers implementation projects. So we're excited to speak with you tonight, and with that, I'm going to hand it off to Ruth.
Good evening, Ruth.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Glad to be here this evening to talk to you a little bit more about the land use plan, which you've already heard a lot about this evening. So we're really excited that our residents are getting to know the land use plan and want to tell you a little bit more about it. So as you probably know by now, the land use plan is Chapter 6 of the city's comprehensive plan. It was last updated in August of 2018. It outlines the policy direction and guidance for land use decisions and helps us to positively and proactively respond to long-term market shifts and demographic trends. This document incorporates community values and preferences. I think one of our speakers mentioned we had over 300 people that were involved in the development of the plan over 5 years that we had input, and that included a city council appointed land use advisory committee, which Ms. Kaufman was a co-chair of. We met with a bunch of stakeholders. We had a number of public meetings where we heard from our community, and also had a number of online town halls. And so out of that effort, we established a vision in the land use plan, which says that Sugar Land will develop and redevelop to remain a desirable place to live and do business. The city will change in response to long-term shifts in market demands and demographic trends, managing that change to preserve the city's appeal. It will balance different land uses, preserve the character of its neighborhoods, and create new walkable mixed-use regional and neighborhood activity centers with a variety of offices, housing, retail, entertainment, and civic institutions. There are also 10 goals in the land use plan, and we've identified a handful of them that most specifically relate to what we're talking about this evening, which is really regional activity centers and this particular site. And so I'm just going to cover a few of those with you. So the first most relevant one is Goal 2, which talks about creating mixed-use activity centers, which are envisioned to be compact and walkable places that draw people throughout the day. They encourage interaction, grow and support business, and build community. We see Sugar Land Town Square as sort of a model for the beginning of a regional activity center. And in the policies in Goal 2, it supports the creation of these areas through both development and redevelopment for these areas to serve as destinations. It recognizes that a lot of these areas are already developed. And so to see the walkable mixed use that we want to see, we're going to have to see redevelopment take place in some of these areas. It also encourages us to evaluate through using multimodal transportation analysis and a school impact analysis when these are being developed, to include multiple flexible public spaces, and having streets that are designed to emphasize pedestrians over vehicles. So more specifically looking at regional activity centers, they're envisioned to be sort of hubs, and that it does indicate that they support multifamily residential with some certain parameters, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. These areas were identified really based on the activity that already exists in these areas and their proximity to major roadways. And again, with the goal of them becoming more compact and walkable through both infill of, the few sites that are left in them, and then redevelopment. So these regional activity centers, these are large, 100, 200 acre sites that should contain a mix of uses such as office and retail and residential, and they should be integrated together in compact walkable areas. A lot of these areas, as you maybe can see in this aerial, Lake Point, Sugar Creek, Town Center, which is, Town Square is a portion of the Town Center Regional Activity Center. Those areas are already largely developed as car-centric areas. And so, again, these are going to need to be created through redevelopment and infill of existing areas. So the next applicable goal is Goal 3, which talks about encouraging residential options. So this goal encourages us to have a mixture of residential options in a variety of settings so that we can appeal to a wide range of people, and that we should expand our housing options to respond to changing demographics and market preferences. In Policy C specifically talks about multifamily, and it talks about locating multifamily in mixed-use settings and having them appropriately scaled to their surroundings. It also encourages us to preserve the nature of our community as being predominantly single-family, and so ensuring that we have an appropriate mix, which is envisioned to be about 88% single-family to 12% multifamily. And there's some specific design guidance to ensure that multifamily becomes part of a cohesive development and improves the long-term value of the site around it. So a little bit more about that guidance on multifamily. The plan does have the citywide recommendation for a percentage, as I mentioned, and then it also gives some specifics for each of the regional and neighborhood activity centers to make sure that each of these areas could potentially have multifamily developed within them in the future. There's also some design elements talking about activating the pedestrian space, utilizing structured parking instead of, parking lots and things like that to make sure that it's really integrated into and has the ability to be integrated into that mixed use area. And then again, those additional studies that I mentioned. should be utilized. Goal 4 is that we should be a great place for business. We want to be a regional employment center, be a premier address for corporate offices, and also foster small businesses. And so most specifically here, the policies talk about being a place for corporate offices to be located and encouraging that to happen within these regional activity centers. And then it also encourages the inclusion of live work spaces for small businesses and entrepreneurial startups. That can be a little bit easier to get off the ground than starting in a major space that's separate from your own home. Goal 8 is about balanced growth. And so this really encourages us to develop and redevelop in a way that maintains the long-term fiscal health of the city and includes promoting a balanced mix of uses. So historically, the city has really tried to make sure that as we're looking at new master plan communities, that they include both commercial and residential, because the commercial helps support the residential. And Devin's actually going to talk about that a little bit more later. Some of the policies that specifically apply here are that we should consider the opportunity cost of proposed development. So in other words, what is it going to cost to serve those properties in the future, and what are we going to be getting out of those properties from a tax standpoint? It encourages us to have new development and redevelopment in mixed-use centers that results in higher value per acre than what you traditionally see with the more suburban, spread out type of development. And then the plan also encourages us to prioritize our capital investments in areas that are near regional and neighborhood activity centers, so we can kind of join in on spurring on development and redevelopment in these areas. Goal 9 is the last one I'm going to talk about, which is fostering redevelopment. This encourages us to promote redevelopment that supports the goals of the city, but is also respectful of the surrounding community. It encourages us to support rehabilitation and redevelopment to prevent, and then also supports infill of underutilized property in our redevelopment areas. So looking at our redevelopment areas and specifically of regional activity centers, as I mentioned, on this map you can see in kind of the darker maroonish color are the redevelopment areas that are within our regional activity centers. So a lot of the property within them is envisioned to see some significant change over time into walkable, compact developments. And this can also include infill development, whether it's a small green site that hasn't ever been developed before, or maybe it's a big parking lot that can be intensified and build something there and have structured parking instead of the large parking lot. And so what we would be looking for is that any redevelopment in these areas contributes to the overall mix of uses and increases the walkable and pedestrian access within the regional activity centers as they come through. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the land use plan is a policy guide, and it's really for us to help us make land use decisions going forward. The plan does encourage the city to be more proactive in redevelopment, and there are some specific action items that we've identified in the plan and the roadmap to get there, which one of the speakers did mention, including for us to evaluate the best way to implement regional activity centers, most specifically through our zoning. So back in 2019, we kicked off that project. So a year after the plan was adopted, we started talking about the project and kind of doing some planning for it. And at that time, we were also beginning to receive some inquiries about development and regional activity centers. And so we realized that before we were going to be able to finish that project, we were going to need some direction, kind of interim direction for how to handle those inquiries that came forward. So we took forward a workshop to the Planning and Zoning Commission in January of 2020 to get some of that interim direction. So what we were asking them was, should all elements of a regional activity center be required in each development proposal? And the answer that we got from them was no. They indicated that some elements of a regional activity center really couldn't realistically be established on a single proposal, recognizing that these regional activity centers are hundreds of acres in some cases. And so, you know, a 20-acre site or an 80-acre site or a 2-acre site isn't going to have everything that's envisioned for a regional activity center on that one site. They did indicate that they believe that each site should be connected to the pedestrian network and contribute to the overall mix of uses within that regional activity center. And that other required elements would depend on that particular project and kind of its context within the regional activity center, including things like looking at the location within the center, the size of the site, the existing uses that are around it, and the existing built environment. So after that, obviously that was in January of 2020. Very shortly thereafter is when COVID kind of came about, and it delayed initiation of that project that we were going to work on. And so we started the project then in 2021, working with Clarion Associates to evaluate the best zoning approach for implementing activity centers. And you heard about this very recently when we shared the results of the phase 1 of that project, which we wrapped up in the fall last year. And we anticipate initiating phase 2 of the project next month. And so the recommendation that came out of that was for us to create some new mixed-use zoning districts that will become standard zoning districts in our development code. But in the meantime, the mechanism that we have in place to implement our land use plan and have mixed-use areas is the planned development district. And so that's really why we're here this evening, is because we have a PD application and that will be coming forward to you that has been brought forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so now I'm going to hand it back to Lauren, and she's going to tell you a little bit about that application.
Thank you, Ruth.
So one of those inquiries that Ruth was talking about that we started receiving is the district at Sugar Creek. So I'm going to start off taking us to the Regional Activity Center where we're located. Ruth touched on that there's 5 regional activity centers in the land use plan. So this is the Sugar Creek Triangle Regional Activity Center. So it is in the dashed line here. So we've got Highway 90, 59, Derry Ashford, and then Alkire Lake Drive. And the development, the proposed development is shown here in this circle. And we circle it and we show it to kind of highlight some of what Ruth was saying as well when we were developing this plan, is that a development's going to come forward that is part of the overall regional activity center. It's an infill development. You can see there's not a lot. There's not a lot of space here. So it doesn't constitute the entire regional activity center. It's part of it, and it's going to bring the overall intended mix of uses that is outlined for this regional activity center. And I will touch on that in a couple slides. First, I want to take us through the proposed development. We do have a zoning application that we are processing. It is for 8 acres. It is proposed as 2 districts, A and B, together in the same application coming forth. District A is about 6 acres. District B, about 2 acres. So A is the multifamily units broken into studio, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom. The 15 live-work units with the ground floor street-facing residential. About 2,400 square feet of additional non-residential space that's not part of the live-work units, and then an integrated structured parking garage. B, shown here, is proposed as 3 buildings focused on a restaurant and retail development. It has outdoor event lawn space, outdoor dining, seating space, focused on the sort of pedestrian area here along the street frontage of this internal access drive here that will run from Century Square Boulevard through the development to Sugar Creek Center Boulevard. And so I just want to touch, I know Ruth went into some detail on how we established multifamily guidance in the plan, but since this development is for a multifamily, it's important to just kind of remember on how we got here. And the Land Use Advisory Committee did evaluate, each regional activity center based on its characteristics, based on its location, based on the existing built environment and the size, and was able to determine, an appropriate number of multifamily units for each. And a lot of that was really in response to some of the previous community feedback. I mean, it's multifamily, it's a hot topic. We know that it's a hot topic in many communities. you know, the development of multifamily. So we recognize that. We respected the previous community impact and included that as part of how we developed the guidance in the plan. So the current, I do want to touch on the numbers though, the current ratio, currently we have a little over 3,000 multifamily units in the city. That constitutes, in the city of Sugar Land, that constitutes about 7.9% of the housing, so about 92.1 single family, 7.9% multifamily. This development with their units would bring it up to about 8.8% of the residential of the city. So as that relates to kind of that 12% that Ruth mentioned earlier in the plan guidance. So back to the proposed development, it is 5 stories for the residential component, 6 for the structured parking and that's integrated into the building design. The live work units are ground floor street facing. They are designed to integrate into the public kind of pedestrian realm on both Century Square Boulevard as well as the internal access drive to you know, open up with patio features, seating, landscaping, different paving to distinguish them, really design features, if you will. And then distinguish signage as well as some larger windows that could, that are a design feature that differentiate the live work units in the ground floor non-residential component versus the remainder of the residential above it. As I mentioned, it does include approximately 2,400 square feet. That's non-residential space that's ground floor, more towards the Sugar Creek Center Boulevard side. So it's not part of the live work units. It's additional space available as well as about 8,000 square feet of support areas, all open to the residents and the public. And those are those kind of support areas you see in typical multifamily centers, leasing office, fitness center, amenity centers, things like that. As far as the uses for the non-residential component on District A, professional office, some neighborhoods, small-scale retail, the ability to have a small grocery market, cafe, coffee shops, some neighborhood-scaled restaurants as well in any of those commercial spaces. And then District B, as mentioned, designed with 3 separate buildings at about 3,800 square feet. Does include the outdoor event area that's between the buildings as well as outdoor seating to serve the restaurant. And again, that's all working towards that goal of being an integrated, a compact, walkable environment with both District A and District B. And touches on a comment I have there that is from the plan to have support services for daytime office population, especially in the more office-centric regional activity center, as well as services that will also support the evening residential population as well. And so as we evaluated the application before us, we looked to the guidance from the plan as it relates to this mix of uses that I was sort of touching on the first slide. And the plan identifies these regional activity centers to include a variety of uses. So you can see office, retail, commercial, and then multifamily, how that needs to be integrated. If you introduce multifamily, it's not to be standalone. That was mentioned in comments, and that's correct. That's the guidance we have in the plan. And it is supposed to be part of a mixed-use center, integrated and compact, walkable. And that's the plan. That's the guidance from the plan. The Sugar Creek Triangle Regional Activity Center, you know, it is, like many other activity centers, close to fully developed. So any new infill development, new redevelopment needs to bring the greater mix of uses to the overall mix, and also, you know, continue to encourage it to be a more overall walkable integrated area. The plan also has these pie charts that are for each regional activity center. So this is pulled from the Sugar Creek Triangle Regional Activity Center that outlines the proposed allocation of uses. So currently in the Sugar Creek Triangle, there are offices, there's retail, there's restaurants, there's hotels, several hotels, a couple, 1 car dealership, soon to be 2 car dealerships. So the missing key is that residential component. So this proposal, when we evaluated it on the components of the mix of uses and having that overall mix of uses is consistent with the guidance from the plan to build in that ultimate intended mix of uses with this infill development in this specific regional activity center. And then the plan provides us guidance on the live work. Ruth touched on it. It's specifically called out in the goals and policy statements in the plan. You know, and it talks about the evolving, kind of changing nature of professionals and how people work. And that plan was approved, you know, pre-pandemic, and we've seen that even more now, post-COVID world where folks are working at home and they prefer to conduct their business maybe at home, but they want a separate entrance. They want to have that separation of their space. So the plan recognized that and aligns with the goal statement that Ruth mentioned, you know, great place for business for Sugar Land to continue to be, and it can provide that efficient space to be used. The mixed use setting. We talked about it. The multifamily has, you know, if you want to introduce that into a regional activity center, it's to be done, created with the mixed use setting. And that's the guidance we got. Ruth mentioned it from the P&Z workshop in January, where the live work units contribute to that vertical integration of uses in a mixed use setting if the non-residential component is incorporated and designed to be on the ground floor of the unit. So I'm going to touch on the renderings, the design renderings for both District A and District B. This would be looking from Sugar Creek Center Boulevard here. This is the internal will be the new internal access drive. So you're looking at District A here. So some inset call-outs. They've got two of them. This is the corner where that additional commercial space is made available, separate from the live work units here. So it kind of pulls out, and see how that's designed into the development. And then here is insetting out where you can see some of the live work units and how they kind of open up onto the sidewalk and integrate into the pedestrian area there, but also have some distinguishing features as well that I mentioned. And so our guidance when we were taking a look at sort of evaluating the design is that, again, developments in regional activity centers, they should contribute to the compact, the walkable nature. It should engage the pedestrians, activate the street, build along these wider pedestrian zones, seating, lighting, the street furniture, all the things we think of when we think of a successful mixed-use development. And when we evaluated the proposal, it utilizes several of these features to activate that pedestrian area, including the live work units that are also designed to contribute to that overall integration into the pedestrian realm, as well as add to the mix of uses. Then District B, design renderings here. So there's two views. This one on the left is from the standing from Century Square Boulevard, kind of looking down that internal access drive. So this would be the District A development, and you can see these are kind of the live work units with the signage, and then District B here. So you've got the buildings, the outdoor space in the middle of the buildings, and then the features along the pedestrian realm. And then this is looking from the opposite direction, looking from the Sugar Creek Center drive side. So the positioning of District B and District A and on the access drive. And again, when we took a look and evaluated District B as part of the zoning application, it creates additional activation. It includes the outdoor seating areas. It includes the outdoor gathering space. It's designed to have the building situated closer to the drive. So these features that we are seeing in the plan are in alignment with the land use plan policy statements on pulling buildings nearer to the street, including outdoor gathering spaces, outdoor public spaces in these regional activity centers as well. And so overall, kind of going back to creating that overall mixed-use setting when you are introducing multifamily into these regional activity centers, we utilize the guidance from the plan in evaluating this proposal. And there's guidance, as I mentioned, for creating the setting with placing the multifamily units, fitness center, the leasing office, the amenity centers on the first floor, utilizing integrated parking garages. These are all pulled directly from the plan when you are introducing the multifamily component. I mentioned again the guidance for having the support services for the daytime office population, and then the services for the evening residential population. That's again, that contributing to that overall mix of uses that are going to support the activity center. So when we evaluated this proposal, staff felt it aligned with the guidance in the plan. Overall maximizing use integration as part of the overall activity center, including District A, including District B, in alignment with our guidance statements in the plan. In my last 2 slides here, I want to touch on what we're calling incremental implementation guidance. And Devon's also going to kind of touch on this a little bit in her slides, but it's really a reality of how we're going to do this, how we're going to develop. And as we are evaluating these development proposals in mostly built-out regional activity centers, we are realizing that the incremental approach to achieving is how we'll achieve the ultimate vision. We received P&Z guidance regarding all the elements in the plan, and that needs to be evaluated. We have to evaluate these proposals based on their context, based on where they are in the regional activity center, location, the size of the site, what's existing around it. Is it next to a major highway? Is it, what's the building next to it? What is it supporting? What does it need? What's it missing? So there's going to be elements that need to be included at each, but they could vary. And so we're looking at an incremental approach, not unlike how Town Square was developed. This area wasn't developed all at the same time. We had the hotel, we had parking garages, we have City Hall, and so that incremental approach with infill development and redevelopment over time is how we see ultimately achieving the vision. And so my last slide, just touching on some of those additional studies, I just wanted to mention that as we were also evaluating this proposal, as we would any from the land use plan, does provide us with guidance on additional studies, transportation studies, school impact studies. Both were completed as part of this proposal. The school impact study was done by the demographer that Fort Bend ISD uses, and they indicated that once fully occupied, it would result in minimal impact to the local schools. The traffic impact analysis was done. Traffic staff was able to concur and identified a few improvements that need to be implemented on the streets, turn lanes, things of that nature on Century Square and Sugar Creek Center Boulevard. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Devon, and we'll be back.
Good evening, Mayor and council
Good
members.
evening, Devon.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit away from the nitty-gritty land use planning topics and talk a little bit about the economic principles, the market. There's been lots of questions and comments about things about the market and what's demand, what's the supply, and sort of bringing that all together, because we've also talked about redevelopment a lot. And as you know, we have two all-in initiatives that are commercial redevelopment and residential reinvestment. So those are hot topics that we're talking about in terms of our overall priorities for the city. So here is our economic impacts of land use decision cycle, and y'all have seen this before. But since we're talking about the land uses, I'm going to bring this up again because this is the development cycle of that supply and demand, and it really demonstrates how the jobs drive the land use decisions, and those land use decisions create the tax revenue, which then can provide the services and the quality of life amenities for our city. So I'll kind of slow down a little bit in talking through this cycle, but the primary mission of the Economic Development Department is to attract primary jobs. Primary jobs are jobs that create goods or services that are utilized mainly outside of the community of Sugar Land. So we're not talking about small business mainly, we're talking about large products or services that are utilized on a statewide, national, global scale in terms of our global economy. And then by having these primary jobs here in Sugar Land, it then creates that demand for housing. And the housing gets built, the population grows, that's your buying power. The buying power that then creates the demand for those retail and dining establishments that then get built. Those retail and dining establishments then create sales tax revenue. We also obviously have property tax revenue from homes and retail that also built. And all those revenues together is what we use to provide services and quality of life amenities in Sugar Land. So I know there's a lot kind of on that slide, but I want to slowly go through that of the jobs create the demand for the housing creates the demand for the retail and the dining creates that revenue that provides our services and quality of life amenities in the community. And so this cycle is really important because it really illustrates that dependence of jobs, which then goes to the population growth, which then creates those land use decisions that happen and the revenues that keep our city moving and thriving and growing forward. You know, we don't really have to look any further than our founding for the city of Sugar Land. It started as a company town, right? And so Imperial Sugar came, it brought jobs. Those jobs then created demand for housing. Imperial, since it was a company town, actually built that housing for their employees. And then as the population grew and those jobs continued to grow, you have those ancillary businesses, retail, dining establishments that are also created. I'm going to show next this sort of, and I'm sorry it's probably a little small for folks out here, but this is, we have a really strong history, thankfully, in Sugar Land of job growth. And, you know, Champion X, or formerly Nowco, they've actually been here since the 1920s. So not long after Imperial Sugar. Schlumberger and Fluor also maintain large campuses here and started in the 1980s. And those are just a few that have started early on, and through the 80s, 90s, we've continued to grow and add more jobs, more businesses to Sugar Land. And so what this chart is showing the correlation between employment growth and population growth. And that's where I'm showing that there's this cycle, this economic development cycle in action. You bring the jobs, it's going to bring the people and that demand for housing, and that's going to then bring the demand for those other business uses, retail and dining, generating those other revenues that we use to support our city. Another example is First Colony. We're in this area, larger area, that master planned developed area actually started in the late 1970s. Homes started to be built there, and it wasn't until 2001, 2000 that Town Square came to be, which I think is what we all consider to be a wonderful representation of a mixed-use center. But it took many years for those houses to be developed as those jobs continue to grow, and then created that demand for something like this to occur. Now, obviously, we have incentivized this and had a big part in its development. But the example being is that we need to bring the jobs, then bring the people and that buying power before these other mixed-use type developments can come to be. So, you know, if we want more places that are these mixed-use centers, now I want to caveat this of Town Square is not a regional activity center. So remember, we need to keep the broader context in mind. But if we want more of these things that are a mix of uses, that are walkable, we're going to need more people and we're going to need more density. And that's how the city is going to continue to grow and thrive into the future, to continue to increase those revenues and provide those high level of services and quality of life amenities to our community. Before I move on for this and kind of this cycle, although I'm going to keep harping on this economic development impact cycle because I think I've already talked about 3 times. But, you know, some folks could say this is sort of an oversimplification of the process. And I just want to say, yeah, in this situation, I am oversimplifying it because, but at the same time, economies are complex, cities are complex. And so changes that we make to incentivize or restrict things are going to have impacts on that the law of supply and demand. So we need to keep that in mind. But in general, creating those jobs then creates that demand for housing, which then creates that demand for retail and dining and includes those revenues that filter into our and fund our services and quality of life amenities. So where are we currently in the life cycle of our city? I know this chart is this is in the land use plan. I know it's been talked about in recent workshops and retreats about where are we in Sugar Land in the life cycle of our city? And so I think if you think about where we are and where we want to be in terms of that path 1 or that path 2, we need to really think about it through the lens of this economic development impact cycle. And we're going to continue to talk about these things because, as I mentioned, we have the all-in initiatives of the commercial redevelopment and the residential reinvestment. But the economic development impact cycle is really the market realities of how we are going to encourage and incentivize these things to move forward. And when I say incentivize, I don't mean provide a loan or provide a cash incentive. It can be a variety of things. It can just be laying the groundwork for that vision and those regulatory laws in place to attract those types of developments to occur here, of what we want to occur here. And there's going to be trade-offs. So, you know, I think there's hesitation about in the room here from community members about multifamily, and there's going to be trade-offs of, if we're going to have new multifamily, that's a way we're going to be able to create the demand for some of these other uses that we would like to see happen in the city, because we don't have infinite land, we have limited land. And so how are we going to make the best use of the land that we have? A couple of other things is that, you know, recently we completed our workforce study, and it showed that we have had a 14% increase in employment in the last 5 years in Sugar Land, meaning jobs here, creating jobs here in Sugar Land, while in that same time period we've only had a 1.4% increase in population. Our retail vacancies, which I know has been talked about a lot here, is actually between 6 and 7%, and has been on a downward trend since the pandemic, which I think is surprising. It has been surprising to us, but it has teetered between 6 and 7%. That's not to say that maybe some other centers are more impacted than others, but overall, in terms of Sugar Land's economy and our retail and vacancies, it's at a very healthy vacancy rate. We consider anything below 10% as performing above typical levels. So, but just some of those things, and you know, what that tells me is that this cycle that I talked about is working. We've created the job growth, and it's creating that demand for the housing, and our existing population, that 1.4% increase, which not really an increase, but probably just a steady plateau of growth, but that buying power, it's supporting our existing retail. And so therefore we do have, you know, some limit, we have a healthy vacancy rate overall in the city. But our population's not growing, so it's not creating the demand for new or redeveloped retail. And so that's kind of some facts, I guess, in terms of where our employment's gone, where our population's gone, and how that economic development impact cycle is working here in Sugar Land. And then finally, on this incremental approach, you know, Lauren already touched on this, and in a moment they're also going to talk about the roadmap that is included in the land use plan, that's also been touched on a little bit by staff as well as by some community members. But what that roadmap touches on is these incremental steps that we need to take. And I know it's been touched on a lot about that these regional activity centers, most of them, three of the 5, are pretty built out. And so you have to recognize that there's a lot of value that's already on the ground, already on the tax rolls. And so things have to be more valuable, more dense, to create the ability financially for those things to change and turn over. And so that's why where some of this incremental approach needs to be thought of, that we're not going to be able to take a whole 200+ acre area and you know, master plan it and then start over kind of how First Colony was built or how some of our other master planned areas were built, because there's already value there. So the phase 1 of the Clarion work that we did, that is that activity center, it talks about this incremental approach. The roadmap that we have in the land use plan also talks about this incremental approach. And I think this is going to be a very key thing that we need to continue to talk about in our all-in initiatives in terms of commercial redevelopment and that infill, and how we continue to take those steps to meet that overall vision. And I think that's all I have. So I'll hand it back to Lauren and Ruth.
Yeah, so the roadmap. This is, when we adopted the land use plan, we adopted Chapter 6, which was the roadmap with a list of action items on how we're going to get there, on how we're going to complete and meet our vision overall as part of the land use plan. So we just wanted to kind of clip out a few, and there's more than this, but we didn't want to burden the presentation with it, but just to kind of say that, and several of these are on that 1 to 2 year time frame, and they've either been done or we're currently in the process of doing them. 15 is the one Devin was just talking about with the Clarion. So we are taking the steps to get us to where we need to be to achieve the vision. It's just the incremental steps that are going to take time. But we wanted to kind of just highlight a few, evaluating some of our existing single-family neighborhoods. We've taken at least one forward that we knew the zoning was inconsistent with how it was developed, which happens when you annex in property that's already developed. The city streetscape policy, looking at the company town, that was that Hill neighborhood work that many of you participated in, the annual housing report, and then looking at the future land use map and determining where we should city initiate zoning so it's consistent on the properties from the future land use map. So just wanted to touch on some of those things that staff is hard at work on. And then lastly, next steps. So again, the plan is our guide. The plan is the guide that staff has, the council approved, the city reviewed and participated in the committee. P&Z and council reviewed and approved, and that's what we have to evaluate development proposals, as they come forward. And the applicant team for the district at Sugar Creek, they've taken the plan into consideration as they created their development proposal, and that's what we've utilized in our evaluation in determining alignment with the plan. So as far as the zoning process, since we do have a zoning application as that is being taken through, it's gone through the Planning and Zoning Commission process. Ultimately, a future public hearing would be scheduled with the City Council to move the project forward. And that's, again, another opportunity for the public to participate in this process and in our zoning processes, and for Council to hear a formal presentation from the applicant team as well. So that's what we have from staff, and we're here to discuss. You can probably see the applicant team is also here as well, so I will leave it to you, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Lauren. I'd remind the council that our discussion needs to be with the staff. This is a workshop item. Anybody need to take a break? Okay, we're gonna take a 10-minute break, and we'll just recess at this time, and then in 10 minutes we'll reconvene. And I think, council members, the way to do this is I'm just going to go individually. Suzanne, I'm going to start with you. Any questions of staff?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay.
Okay, this is for Devin. I think it's for Devin. So I kind of went and listened to everybody that spoke, and there were 12 points, so I'm not going to do all 12 points. I'm saying that's a good thing. I'm just going to name them real quick, but then I'm going to ask you the question I have. So the 12 points were school impact, crime, traffic increase, property values decreased, transient, existing empty retail space, empty apartments that are existing, long-term deterioration, that's the one I want you to talk about. Standalone apartments, what is that? Is that what we're doing? Class A value, live, work, nobody wants this, and financial gain, which I don't think is a situation. So my question is, long-term deterioration, do you see that? They kept saying Stafford versus these apartments. Do you see that these apartments can even compare to what we saw in Stafford?
So, I will say that I don't have like institutional knowledge or history of Houston and Stafford, or I hear Fondren a lot. I've heard the stories, okay? I have not seen it or lived it myself because I didn't grow up here. But in terms of there's been discussions here in written comments as well as in the P&Z meetings about the submarket and Missouri City or Stafford or those other areas. And it's not comparable because we have so heavily regulated multifamily in Sugar Land. We have created our own supply and demand dynamic here. And so the market for multifamily is the boundaries of Sugar Land. It is not the broader submarket boundaries. Because we have regulated it and we have restricted that supply, which has then created pent-up demand, right? So it's not comparable in terms of the overall market. I think that from what I do understand that most of those other apartments were more like garden style, like different style than what these are being proposed in terms of mixed, vertically, hidden parking garages, a focus on design, luxury. So I don't think that you can put those in the same category of those apartments that were developed a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades ago, compared to what we're talking about of the development, the quality development of this proposal.
Okay, and just as a follow-up, all that you talked about with development and the need to develop to stay alive and thriving as a city, if we don't do this, what will we do there?
That's a great question.
Good question. Thank you.
Deshaun?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to first of all thank staff for putting together a great presentation and leading us to where we're at today. And also thank all the speakers that came out and took time out. Having 20 plus individuals come out or send us emails, we appreciate your feedback and we take your feedback seriously. Question for staff. I've heard Class A a lot, but where will rents start? Do we have an approximate idea of where rents will start for a project of like this sort?
I can say 1,800, 2,000. Those are the numbers we've heard at the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings from the applicant teams in that kind of vicinity.
And do we know how these 1,800 to 2,000, which we don't know, compares to the apartments along Dulles, which back up against Sugar Creek?
We did look at, based on some of the discussions that were held at the commission level, we did look at some of the submarket. The submarkets has come up. That's been a topic of conversation, and we have seen the apartment values and rents in Sugar Land and our occupancy rates continue to increase at a higher rate than those in some of our surrounding submarkets, if you want to refer to them as that. So we are trending differently, upward.
Very good. And so the next time this comes in front of us, if we can have an idea of what the Dallas Avenue rents are there in Sugar
Sure. Oh,
Creek.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
an idea of what we're looking at for these, because I feel there may be a difference, or maybe there's not a difference, and then we don't know what we're attracting. I also heard a lot that there's not any plans for the mixed use, the 3,800 square foot or 2,800 square foot buildings. Can we not, as a city, if we move forward with the project, can we not put in that this has to be developed within a certain time period, or have some kind of penalties?
Looking at Meredith. So we, a similar discussion sort of came up again at the commission level on if you could write in construction timelines into a zoning document, because again, that's what we're doing. It's a zoning application. We asked our legal team that. They researched it and had never seen any other, there was no case law around it. So we couldn't land on an appropriate approach for that from a zoning document perspective. It's different, we're not entering into development agreements, or this isn't, they're not asking for incentives from the city or anything. So it is just a standard zoning case.
Let me ask a different question,
Sure.
and I think that can help clarify it. A planned development is not by right. Is this a planned development?
Yes.
There's your answer.
I get it. And then it was also brought up by one of the speakers that the city doesn't have any live-work units. I believe that's incorrect. Am I correct?
Right, yes.
We do have live-work units.
We do in Lake Point, on Lake Point Parkway. We
I
have
live
several.
in one of them.
You live in one of them, right? And then in the presentation, one circle was drawn around, that black circle that was there. But then I saw a lot of other green space there as well. There's a couple of other pieces of dirt that happen to be available.
Yes.
Does the land use allow us to pull out just one section and not look at the entire RAC? Are we allowed to just pull out that one black circle and make it a PD?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's a request, it's a rezoning request, and we would, when we evaluate those, they're evaluated on several things, but really the comprehensive plan and the land use plan being one of those elements of the comprehensive plan. So if we find that it's in alignment with our comprehensive plan and our codes, then we can move forward.
I'm not sure I understood the question, Nishant.
So, Mayor, the entire RAC there's
the regional activity center,
right,
which is
there's
a triangle.
just the 8 acres that we're talking about was the black circle, but there's other pieces of dirt that are available out there too, but that's zoned office.
Yes, I think he was asking about doing a planned development zoning district where there's business office or general business or other zoning districts around it. I will also mention that the only way to develop multifamily in the city is through a planned development district. That's our only mechanism right now. So we would evaluate obviously on that, which is, based on the development code, and then going through our, land use plan and comprehensive plan documents.
Sure. No more questions.
Carol?
Well, I'd like to thank all the speakers for coming out tonight and speaking, because your input is very important. And I guess to follow up on something that Councilmember Kamali asked, so my understanding was that there were going to be a number of efficiencies or something, and that were 600 square feet. So I guess I'd be surprised that would start at $1,800 for 600 square feet. But anyway, as far as the District A on the ground floor, there were a number of allowed uses, one of which was, I think, maybe a cafe type thing. Can that be, I guess, made so that like a cafe or something, a little grocery or bakery or something, be like one of the required uses on there?
So was trying to get the number of units. I think that's what you were asking when you said efficiency. Maybe you meant.
Yeah, that's probably not the right name for
that's
it, but there's a.
Studio.
Studio, that's what I meant, I'm
Yes.
sorry. I was thinking there was a 600 square foot studio, so a 600 square foot studio is going to start at $1,800?
And again, I am trying to remember back from the conversations we had from the commission meeting. I mean, you know, we're not, that wasn't necessarily part of all of our discussions of rent, because that's not what is sort of being codified in the zoning. So we didn't focus on that as much. So I apologize for not having that. We can get you that information, though. Not a problem.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Carol, the way to ask that is, why don't you make sure that you have that information when we comes before council for the public hearing?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So yes, the studio, right now, it's 29, 281 bedroom and 78 two-bedroom. That's how they've got it broken up, if that was your question. Wasn't sure.
Oh, well, I was just looking at
Yours
the,
just was about rent.
I was just hearing the cost, because you said they were going to start about $1,800, and I was thinking, wow, 600 square feet for $1,800 seems a little bit high, but I was just sort of curious if that was $1,800 was correct for a 600 square foot studio. But yeah, so anyway, so on the District A ground floor, so a cafe or something is just one of the allowed uses. It's not like a required use to have one of the areas to be that.
It's not. It's you know, when we go through these PDs, they have use lists that
Right, yeah,
an applicant
exactly.
can choose from as far as their tenants. Right.
Right.
So that is one of them.
Okay, and so I guess the follow-up to that is, so District B, talk about all the District B restaurant developments. And so, again, on District B, you've got the 3 buildings there, and there are a number of, you know, allowed uses. So will at least one of those be required to be a restaurant, or will we could potentially, as one of the public commenters say, end up with, you know, a dry cleaner, a nail salon, and a, you know, hair shop?
Sure, great question. Right now, the way it's written is that there are a number of uses, as you probably saw in District B. The council, you know, when we come back and you hear this as part of the public hearing, that can be part of your comments, your feedback, your direction to the applicant team is what you want to see. If you would like to see them, you know, take a look at trying to limit one of them to being a restaurant or having to be a restaurant, that's part of your purview as council when you're reviewing the plan development document.
And so I guess also, so is there a way, I guess there were follow-up, I guess, of what also is brought up. So can we make it so that District B has to be done at the same time as District A? Because if we approve District A, I mean, District B might not ever get done. And I know part of the Regional Activity Center plan is to have compact walkable districts, walkable area. And I know on Dairy Asher, I mean, there's some retail and restaurant there, but I haven't walked it, but I would think it'd be a pretty good little walk from the proposed apartments over to those places on Dairy Ashford. So if you don't have, you know, that development, the District B there, you would essentially end up with, you know, standalone apartments in District A. Because on the live work, I mean, it may or may not be something that's going to bring in a lot of outside traffic, because you could have like a surveyor and a geoscientist and stuff like that who use that as their office, but they're going out to consult with people, not bringing in a bunch of people to their office.
Yeah, you may have seen that at the beginning when the commission was reviewing the PD, it actually did not include District B.
Right, I remember that.
That was brought in by Kaplan, you know, to be part of the proposal. But, you know, we consider, you know, I think our argument to that would be, we consider the District A to constitute the mixed-use element. When that's the guidance that we got from the commission, that's the way we're evaluating the live work as part of the entire District A development, having the ground floor non-residential, but also having the rest of the 2,400 square feet that's open to commercial use apart from the live work, as well as the plan guidance that says you need to incorporate all the elements of the multifamily, the fitness center, the amenity center, and have those things open to the public. So in looking at the plan and how it gives us the guidance to not have standalone multifamily, that's how we as staff has evaluated that it complies with that guidance to not be standalone multifamily for District A.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
Can I just add one thing on that?
Sure.
I would encourage to think about the impact cycle that I talked about again, about thinking about creating that demand, creating the jobs that then creates the housing demand that then creates the retail demand. Requiring or legislating for demand to be there when it's not there yet could be problematic for the future development of those businesses rather than allowing it to occur through the economic cycle. In terms of when you're asking about making B development.
I don't know. I just think it would be nice to have a restaurant actually there someplace, you know, within a very short distance of that development.
So what I've heard from, and I've heard feedback from all sides on this issue, are we feeling confident with the level of occupancy in this proposed development to energize those storefronts in Sugar Creek? There's concerns about, you know, the grocery store is no longer there. And I understand that in order to keep our storefronts open, we have to have density. So that's the whole goal of what we're trying to do here, is to secure our sales tax revenue. So do we feel confident that if we get 70% occupancy, that that's going to energize our sales tax revenues in the Sugar Creek area or Sugar Land in general?
I think it will certainly have a positive impact when you have 1,000 new, I mean, we're talking about 300 to 400 units, so I'm going to say 1,000 or more people that get added to an area. Now, is your question to the point of will it create demand for a grocery store? Probably not. We probably need more than 1,000 people for that to occur. But will it have a positive impact on other businesses and creating more sales tax revenue? Absolutely.
Stuart.
Thank you, Mayor. This is not a question, it's more in the line of council discussion. And I actually made up some notes so I wouldn't forget anything. So if you'll indulge me, please, I'm just going to read my notes. Over the past several months, I've been listening to the discussion on both sides of the issue. We have a quality developer and a best-in-class city planning department. We've heard from individuals who are opposed to this project and individuals who are in favor of it. I believe that I can bring a unique perspective to this discussion. For 20 years, I have leased office space on the 5th floor at 2 Sugar Creek Center. My building is right next door to the property in question. I've spent many of my waking hours over the last 20 years looking out my window at the subject property. And this is what I know. First of all, I actually believe in regional and neighborhood activity centers, RACs and NACs. Within 3 miles of the subject property, we have 3 RACs already. We have Town Center, where we are now. We have Lake Point, where my wife and I were actually some of the very first residents to move into Lake Point back in '07. And then we have Imperial, that is going very slowly, but it is going to be developed in a very desirable way as a RAC as well. Much deference has been given to the land use plan of 2018, which was a very well thought out and well-reasoned document developed with much public and expert input over the last 5 years. However, the land use plan is not an ordinance. It does not have weight other than guidance. Simply because a certain area is designated as a RAC on the map does not predestine it to be so. It is only one possible use for that area. Please let me explain why this project is not appropriate for this area and why it will not benefit the city of Sugar Land nor its residents. First of all, why the Sugar Creek Triangle is not a RAC. This is not a RAC because the Sugar Creek Triangle overwhelmingly consists of office buildings, car dealerships, budget motels, and high turnover strip centers. It's not a RAC because it's not walkable for dining. There are dining options that can be accessed by traversing a large concrete parking lot. I've done that on occasion. Restaurants have come and gone many times over my 20 years in that space. The only one that's made it for a long time is Jack in the Box. Papacitos has existed for that many years, but you would have to cross Dairy Ashford to get to Papacitos. That is not the definition of walkability. It's not a rack because it's not walkable for retail as well. In my 20 years, many have tried one type of retail or another, but the only one that has really made it in that time period is Sherwin-Williams. And that's not something that I've ever walked to in my 20 years of being right there. It's not a rack because the area in the Sugar Creek Triangle is bisected by Dairy Ashford. This barrier makes the area unwalkable, and it will never be walkable unless we build an overpass or an underpass to cross Dairy Ashford. This effectively limits the proposed rack to the west side of Dairy Ashford. Why we should not try to develop another rack, particularly in this part of Sugar Land. As previously mentioned, there are 3 other racks in Sugar Land, the most distant from the subject property being 2.9 miles away. Those 3 racks already have issues with keeping long-term tenants. There is vacant retail and dining in Town Square, and particularly in Lake Point, where there are empty restaurants. I used to go to that pizza place whose name I can't even remember, but it's been empty since about 2 years after they built Lake Point. It's right by Steakhouse.
The Vines.
Yes, Coal Vines, thank you. We're already growing a very exciting and promising rack in Imperial, and we will need to attract tenants there as well. Why would we want to develop a rack to compete with our 3 existing racks that are so close by? How many racks can exist in such a small area? I don't think anybody's ever mentioned the grid in Stafford. One of our stated goals is to attract young professionals to Sugar Land. The grid in Stafford is a rack with multifamily housing. What it also already has is the type of dining and nightlife options that appeal to young professionals. It has lower rents than we have here in Sugar Land, and it has a location that's 2.6 miles closer to the Houston nightlife and employment centers. What I believe this project actually is a very nice apartment complex with some amenities, a lawn, a few thousand square feet of sacrificial retail space. It's not going to attract the young professionals that we seek. Who would be attracted to this space instead of the other spaces that are available? It is not walkable. It is not needed for the growth of Sugar Land. This project should not go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. William?
I do not have a statement prepared, but I do have questions. We've talked a lot about the cycle, which I think we do need to exist. That cycle, I am curious because I know someone has mentioned this before, but of the employees that work in Sugar Land, how many, on a guess, live in Sugar Land? You gave us a number from your graph that there's 60,000 jobs. I'm just using a rough line. How many actually work in Sugar Land? I'm curious.
So I'm going off of memory. We just completed our workforce study that actually talks about how many workers or jobs we have in Sugar Land and those jobs that people also live in Sugar Land versus the people that live in Sugar Land and are commuting out for jobs. We have very little overlap. So we have about, I think the last number, it's about 70,000 jobs is what we have in Sugar Land now, and we have very little overlap. Most people that live here are commuting out for their jobs every day, and a lot of people that work here are commuting in for those jobs every day.
Okay. And I asked that because of the apartment aspect of District A in this. And by the way, when I was a kid, I grew up in an apartment, so.
And I can get you I have 2 slides in my head from our workforce study that I just can't quote the exact numbers off of memory, but we have 2 slides, one that shows the circle of the jobs that are in Sugar Land, the people, and just the very little overlap that exists. The other thing is that there are the top 3 or 4 categories of folks that are commuting in every day for jobs, and the top 2 were healthcare and education teachers in the education industry. Those are the top 2 of occupations that people are migrating into Sugar Land every day for jobs.
two of the new police officers said they would love to find a place in Sugar Land to live, and they're still searching, so we want them here, obviously. When we talk about pedestrian traffic as it relates to this project, where are they going? I know that sounds like a silly question, and I was raised in this area, and I've driven up and down Dairy Effort a million times by the bank building, and so when we're talking about, we think of town center or other, I could tell you, I think I know where they're going. They're going to, the established entertainment areas, but where, when we keep using the word pedestrian traffic, where are they going? Is there something in that area I don't know about, like fishing, or what am I missing?
Fishing, no. I think when we looked at the land use plan and evaluating these 5 areas, it was more about looking towards the future and looking at to what could be there in the future. And so that's why we continue to say that, because with the goal to redevelop these and to make them these activity centers, we don't want to lose sight of that component, because if things start to develop and we don't keep that in mind, to keep the sidewalks connected, to make sure it's focused in on the activating the street frontage and doing all that, then we'll lose that element, overall when we hopefully ultimately reach our vision. So that was kind of part of the long-term vision for the future, and so that's why we continue to talk about it. That's why we continue to say that that's the way we want any of these new developments or infill developments to focus on that feature. It's kind of
Thank you for that. And as I think about that area, because I've been doing a little research about the map to Councilman Nishad's question earlier, there's 7.4 acres sort of really near this, but it's along the freeway. But beyond that, there's a bank building property with a little space. So when we're thinking of future development, what I'm thinking of in my mind is actually future redevelopment, because there's really not a lot, as I looked at the tax roll, there's really not a lot of undeveloped land there beyond this 8 and 7.4.
You're right, and you can see it here. We had one of the speakers speaking about this property here. This is where the council just approved the new Porsche dealership. This is the acreage behind the old, Bally's building, the Papacitos, and just directly north of the site, there's 1 or 2 parcels there too, and that's really it.
Yeah, and that's what.
And that's those are they're the other racks. I mean, that's not unlike the one we're in here.
Yeah.
When you take a look at this 200 acres, that includes the mall, that includes Methodist. They're larger areas that are car-centric. They're largely developed. So that's why when we talk about walkable and connecting it, we're looking towards the future. We're looking to, we can't develop how we have for these past 20 years. We have to look at the next 20 years and how we're gonna survive.
And I think that's a key, what you just said. So when I think of development, I think of something new. And then when I think of redevelopment, is taking what has been developed and make it anew. There's the separation. I think I could probably narrow it down to that. I'm understanding more about the District A and the District B process, going back to the cycle. So I've still got some questions, but they'll follow later, I'm sure.
Thank you, William. All right, ladies. Tell me a little bit about what happened at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We didn't hear anything. I'd like to get a brief recap of the comments, some of the questions that were asked at P&Z, so that we have a full understanding of that.
Sure. Gosh, I should have brought all my notes. I have to say there wasn't, I'm sitting here looking at the PD documents here that you all had as part of your agenda item this evening, and there wasn't really a lot of significant changes to the design, to the layout of the site. I think that's something we're used to seeing a lot with our very detailed commission. And so, the building layouts, the site planning, now District B was brought in. That was a large part of the discussion. Some of what has been mentioned this evening started at the workshop with the Planning and Zoning Commission on District B, because that was just left out at that time as going to be, you know, coming back for the future. And when we started really evaluating it versus the land use plan, and asking those questions, that's when it was like, okay, yes, let's bring in District B. So that was a huge change. There was discussion on the traffic. They wanted to take a look at you know, where the traffic impact analysis was studying the scope of the TIA. There were a lot of comments. You heard some this evening on the traffic.
Tell me a little bit about District B. What were the comments around that?
Primarily centered around including it, having it, you know, be part of the overall zoning application, not to come back later and be this kind of unknown piece, you know, 2 acres just out there unknown. So it was about bringing it in. It was about, again, contributing to the overall mix of uses. I think it's always been about going back to going to the plan.
So that tells me the original plan, just District A, which is nothing but a standalone. It's an apartment project masquerading as a mixed-use project. That's what it is. And so that tells me that P&Z drove the District B. So District B is included in the plan?
Yes.
What are the controls around that District B ever gets even built?
And that's, so we talked a little bit about that. That was part of discussion with the commission. There aren't any provisions in the PD that say, as far as a development timeline.
Right.
It talks about features that they will develop with A. They're going to obviously install the internal access drive. They're going to install the pedestrian network on both sides of the internal access drive. They're going to have some of the outdoor space along that pedestrian network. So setting up the framework for B, from a construction standpoint, the drainage is all going to be taken into consideration for the entire 8 acres as part of the construction. So there are things that are happening, obviously separate from that portion, is separate from a zoning ordinance, but I'm just bringing it up for purposes of the discussion. But yes, District B came on at the public hearing, but after the workshop.
As a requirement?
Yes, sir.
So I've got a developer with no experience developing mixed-use retail who's admitted in a public meeting that he's going to flip the property. So I'm wondering, and we've got no controls around whether District B ever gets built. I could, and I don't want you guys to take this the wrong way, I could literally call 10 developers right now, apartment developers, Midway, Hines, guys that have done many more, and we could build this. There's nothing unique about this. It's a PD, and from my days on planning and zoning, the PD used to be a superior development. Now, we've changed some of the language. My other concern is that we seem to be supporting something. I'm not quite sure we believe in it. We seem to be supporting it because of a fear that we're not going to get another project. I don't have that same fear. I've always done, every development I've ever done has been from a position of strength. And I think we've got one of the strongest economies, one of the strongest markets. Like I said, we could do an apartment project anywhere we wanted to do it. There's nothing unique about this. In fact, it is what it is. I mean, it's an apartment project masquerading as mixed-use retail. So I'd like to hear at the public hearing, I'd like to hear some of my concerns addressed. I'd like to understand the market study of what those uses are going to be. So we've said, I've heard some comments earlier, I'm not sure they need to be a nail salon, but if we're going to have restaurants, I want to hear about it. I want to hear about the market study that justifies it. In fact, there's population for those restaurants. I want to hear why this is going to be successful, other than just being an apartment project and leasing up some units. And I want to hear some details about why this is, we're going to get one chance to do this. And I want to hear why this is the best development that we can do in Sugar Land, not just a development.
We can do that.
Okay, thank you. Item number 4. Well, we're going to skip council member reports. I think council's, yeah. We're going to move to item number B, city manager report, and I've asked Mike to give all of us an update on Officer Munoz.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I mean, on behalf of all of our staff, our thoughts and prayers are with Officer Munoz and his family and the officers of our police department and our fire first responders that were also there. Those are tough situations that that nobody ever wants to be in. So Officer Munoz, I know, I don't want to get into too much details, but he, Chief, if you can come up and just brief us on what the latest is that we can share there. And also the Sugar Land Police Department Facebook page has all the different mechanisms where the public can support Officer Munoz, and there's already been a huge outpouring of support. But that's a good place for our residents to go, and I'll turn it over to the chief.
Thank you, Mr. Goodrum and City Mayor and Council. First of all, thank you all for your support. Thanks to the community. Thanks to everyone, our staff, our city staff. It's been just an outpouring of support. It's been very, very emotional throughout the department. It's obviously a trying time. We got a lot of people that's affected. A lot of officers, we're dealing with it. I know we'll get through it. We were with Officer Munoz as early as about 5 hours ago, earlier today, and he's alert. He knows what's happening, but obviously they have him under some serious medication. He's intubated, so he can't talk. But it's just looking at the situation. He's actually started surgery about 3 or 4 hours ago, and they said it was going to be a 4 to 6, maybe even longer surgery. So he's going through a lot of different issues. Specifically, we've heard some potential spinal issues and stuff like that. Our prayers and thoughts are with him, his family. We want to make sure, that he comes out of this well. Our prayers also with our entire police department. And so it's really a trying time. When I arrived on the scene early Sunday morning, we saw 2 helicopters on the scene, and as I was getting out my car, they were literally putting him on a stretcher and getting ready to life flight him. So it's just a tragic incident, specifically when people get behind the wheel after they've been drinking alcohol. We've seen this far too many times, so we're going to definitely put out that message. But what I also like to say is we got some very heroic officers that was right there on the scene. They literally pulled him out, began CPR, and I think because of them, he is still alive at this moment. So I'm going to ask Captain Lahr to just share some thoughts about what he's heard even more so.
Yeah, Pete, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Obviously, with this incident, I'll just give a brief rundown with what happened. Officer Munoz obviously injured in this terrible accident. Chief has kind of touched on a lot of the actions and things that we have done to support the Munoz family, as well as our police department, our officers who are still continuing to answer calls for service and providing excellent service. Truly, their professionalism is outstanding in showing that they're willing to continue to take care of our city, as well as navigate through their emotions and everything that they're dealing with one of their coworkers and partners in a hospital bed. So we continue to support them. We continue to make sure that they're well staffed, that they have everything they need, while we provide the utmost support for the Munoz family. Currently, the last update I received, he is in surgery now, so a couple of hours. As soon as we get another update, I'll be sure to pass along to the chief, and then that way we can kind of keep everyone up to date. But of course, it's challenging. One of the first times that we have experienced this since the late 80s, and obviously I wasn't around for that, but considering that the entire police department has done an excellent job in managing this and handling this and showing support for the family. We truly, truly do thank everyone, the city, everyone that has supported us, everyone that's reaching out, and we're very thankful for that. Thank you for the support.
Jimmy.
Mayor, Council, thank you. So currently what we're doing, information is power, information is healing. So what we're doing is we're going around the clock. We started a special relay service to where our officers are getting updates. We just started that today. While the chief and the captain were at the scene, I was at the hospital dealing with that aftermath. I was there with his wife. I think we need to make special mention of her, an amazing woman. And I can see.
And 2 young kids, I think, too, isn't it, Jim?
Do what, sir?
2. She has 2. They have 2 kids.
They have two very small kids. Yeah. Officer Munoz comes from another police department. They flew in yesterday. They flew in today. They're flying in tomorrow. While counsel, my head was ducked, I was talking to the officers. They will be at our 9 o'clock roll call to meet the friends of Reuben. We can go on and on and on and thank everybody, the fire department, the dispatchers, the citizens, the witnesses who helped. When this gets unveiled, you are going to be amazed at the officers, the citizens, the dispatchers, the fire, the EMS, and Memorial Hermann Hospital staff. It was just unbelievable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You okay?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn at 8:15. I don't think. Question.